Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of an Unexpected Podcast. My name is Tim, and with me, as always, we have Matt, Mick, Rainier, and Devin. All right, so we're going to go over a list real quick, guys. You guys excited for this one? It's our first list we're going to be reviewing.
Yay.
Yep.
Absolutely.
All right,
Good.
so
where's this list coming from, Tim?
Yeah, so this list is going to be coming from the Competitive Players Forum from Scott Warren. So, Matt, I'm going to have you read the list real quick.
Okay, so this list comes from the Blackgate Opens Legendary Legion, which is in the Gondor Warbook. It's a 600-point list. And it starts off with Warband 1, which is a Troll Chieftain, who is mandatory, must be the army leader of this list. And he's the upgraded Troll Chieftain under the Legendary Legion who gets the extra point of Might, Will, and Fate. With him are 7 Morannons with shield, 6 Morannons with shield and spear, 1 Morannon with shield and banner. Warband 2 is the Mouth of Sauron on Armored Horse, who's the other named hero you can get in this list. And he has 6 Morannons with shield, 6 Morannons with shield and spear, and a Mordor Troll with drum. Oh, and there's a question at the end which says, can you march and use the drum to get an extra 6 inches of move? The answer to that question is yes. Although I would say the Mouth of Sauron's the guy that can march in this list. He's only got 2 might, and this list is a little low on might to begin with, so I'm not sure how often you're actually going to be marching with this guy.
So I just want to clarify real quick. There is no signal tower?
There is no signal tower, which is a big problem with this list, but we'll get to that.
Already a huge failing. Already huge. So, as everyone probably knows, this is a Legion. So there's Legion rules attached to it. I think, Mick, you have the book on that, right?
Yeah, I've got it here. So it's got 2 rules. One of them, Man has already mentioned. So the Troll Chieftain has to be your leader, and he gets the additional points. And the other rule is that the orcs, which you have in this legion, if you outnumber your opponents in combat, then the orcs get +1 to wound. So you really want to be maximizing your numbers here to be outnumbering your opponents as much as you can.
Exactly. That's actually a first thought I initially had, is the use of the Morannons actually prevents maximizing numbers. I actually think I'd switch to Mordor Orcs. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I think I agree mostly. Or I would go with, let's say, half Morannon Orcs, half Mordor Orcs, just to maximize numbers as much as I can.
Why would you even do half? Just curious.
Well, if my front line is Morannons with shield and spear, which is shields, then I would be getting the strength 4 and defense 6 at the front. So it's good against bowfire, and it would be protecting my orcs from bowfire in the back ranks, and they would have shields, spears, and only defense 4.
So here's the counter argument to that. Under the special rule, you only get the +1 if you outnumber with the units that are actually in contact with the enemy. So if you're throwing in extra spear supports into a combat, that doesn't help you get the 2 wound roll. So an alternate strategy, if you want to go with Morannons, and I think it's a reasonable thing to do, is you go with more Morannons who have the higher defense, and you equip them all with shield, as Scott's done here. And then, if you get a shield support, that's fine. But what you try and do is you try and lap around the other guy. So you try and get 2 Morannons into combat with somebody, as opposed to, 1 orc in front and then an orc spear supporting, or Morannon in front and a orc spear supporting, to try and get that +1 to wound on top of the strength 4. So I think that is a viable alternative strategy. You can probably squeeze a couple more figures into this list if you change over to some orcs, but I'm not sure that's always going to help you maximize that +1.
So you're actually suggesting get rid of all the spears. Oh, God, sorry, Rainier.
Oh yeah, and back to what you were saying to maximize getting people in combat. I wouldn't do 50-50 spear with hand weapon. You can drop some of the spears to get more, like Matt was saying, more orcs in. whether it be orcs with shields or just naked orcs, would be what, like 5 points, 5 or 6 points. So yeah, like maximize your guys. And also, I'm kind of baffled why the list doesn't have 20 bows, but that's just like I'm just
Missed opportunity. It's a missed opportunity. I mean,
You definitely need a single tower and 20 more bows.
yeah.
There you go.
One
Joke, by the way.
One other thing to think about here is, and this is, the Mordor Troll with the drum needs to go in the Troll Chieftain's warband. And I think that's true for 3 reasons. The first is the Troll Chieftain is obviously your hitter. He's the guy you need to get into combat. He's the one that you need to get to move. The Mouth of Sauron's going to get there eventually. He moves 10 inches. But the Troll Chieftain is the one you need to move quickly if you're going to move with him. The second thing is that gives you 2 monsters in the same warband. And it gives you some interesting synergies that you can do with hurls. Because the way the hurl rule works is you hurl a figure into another one of your monsters. That monster will take a strength 3 hit, which he'll shrug off. But then everybody else who happens to be in combat with that monster will get knocked down and take a strength 3 hit. And that's a way to save your guys from being surrounded and killed in one instance, and also do a lot of damage in the other. So what you can do is set up the 2 monsters maybe 3 or 4 inches apart, and that creates a little zone between those 2 where the other side is going to be really reluctant to go, because if they lose a combat, then the one monster can throw into the other monster and start taking some stuff down. And then the last reason to switch them over is that your banner's with the Troll Chieftain. You definitely want that banner around that Mordor Troll to give him the extra die.
Yeah, but at the same time, the whole idea with the Mordor Troll with the drum, I'd say that's potentially questionable, because we're looking at 600 points. We're already spending almost 150 on a Troll Chieftain, and the total numbers are only 29. I was thinking, what if you were to drop the Mordor Troll with the drum and swap him for something like an Orc Captain on a Warg, a couple of Warg Riders, and then maybe another 10 more on Orcs?
Actually, I have to admit, I agree with Mick. Actually, this was the point I was going to say. I think the Troll Drum is great. I think it's actually a good unit. However, it is sucking up a lot of points in a list where it's totally designed to outnumber the opponent in order to maximize its benefits. So I actually think the Troll here is not a good idea. Maybe at 800 points, but at this point level, I wouldn't. If you really, really are insistent on keeping the Troll, then I actually maybe questionably would drop the Mouth of Sauron. But that once again, you're losing a little bit of potential that he provides. I think the better option is pretty much, yeah, drop the Troll, downgrade the Morannons, and try to maximize the numbers out. And then, of course, a few Warg Riders for those scenarios that require speed, or maybe just objective capturing, or just a little utility if you use it. So I definitely would agree with Mick. I think, what is your guys' thoughts on the Mouth of Sauron himself? I mean, personally, I see the benefit of, transfixing a target, surrounding him, and getting all the +1 wounds and crushing somebody. And I think he's also a pretty formidable fighter. So I'm wondering, like, Rainier, what's your thoughts on that?
I like him, actually. Well, first off, it's a perfect theme. It's straight from the movie. But not only that, at 600 points, a lot of people are going to bring mid-tier heroes like Huron, who have like 3 might, 1 will, 1 fate. And I think the Mouth of Sauron, of course, he's not going to shut down someone like Boromir or Aragorn, but he will have the ability to knock out, say, an unnamed hero with a transfix, or someone like Huron, or those type of models. So I like him, to be honest.
All right. So
Yeah,
does that wrap?
I really like Mouth of Sauron as well, actually.
I guess
Because also he's 5'5", so he's actually going to be outfighting a lot of basic troops. And at 500 points, 5'5" on a hero, especially mounted with a couple of might points plus will for random spell, it's all really useful. So I would keep him.
so. I guess the one last thing I'd say is, I mean, you could change this list to drop the Mordor Troll with the drum and add in an Orc Captain and a bunch more Orcs. I think that becomes a very different list than the list that's here. The list that's here is one that focuses on the 2 it focuses on the two monsters, and the addition of the Mordor troll side by side with the troll chieftain means that there's two really big threats here as opposed to one. And at 600 points, Magic is going to be able to stop one of those threats, but it can't stop two. The odds that there are going to be two spellcasters who can stop monsters in the other army approach zero. So I think it actually is a viable strategy to have a second troll alongside your souped up troll chieftain, where the resources that are going to stop a monster are going to be concentrated on that other Mordor troll so that the troll chieftain can become rampant. And I also think it's a viable strategy to take the drum to make sure that those two trolls get where you need them to be and get there quickly. Which is all not to say that there's a different way to write this list that has more orcs in it and only the troll chieftain. But I think this list has a thought out strategy, and I think that strategy can work.
So I'm curious, Tim, you as the player who brings up this list to us, this panel here, what's your thoughts? If you had to rewrite this list, given the advice that you've heard right now from all four of us, what would be your final call? If you had written this list and you heard our advice, how would you decide? Whose advice would you take and how you would change it?
I think Tim is just gonna quit now.
Oh, dang. That's it, guys. I'm done. I'm finished. Well, I think you got to take advantage of the special rule, which is you want to get it in as many fights as possible. So I think I definitely would go more towards outnumbering, get as many people in combat as possible. So I'd probably go down that route. Like you guys always say, I think a little bit of mobility with what Nick said with the Warg Riders. I mean, it's invaluable to have mobility in an army. And at 600 points, you're not going to see a ton of cavalry out there. So something like 3 or 2 Warg Riders or any amount of Warg Riders. I mean, that gives you options. It makes, if you get the Warg Riders behind the battle line, for example, and they try to take off spear supports, well, then your opponent has to position himself. And even if he doesn't want to it makes him think, okay, what are the Warg Riders going for? So it makes your opponent's job that much harder when you have cavalry. So I definitely think I try to take advantage of the rule from the Legion and get as many numbers, and then go for what Nick said and try to get the cavalry in there as well.
I guess I would just add, the Mordor troll obviously still gives you the mobility with the war drum. It's just that in a more classic sense, I would rather just have a few cavalry models over the war drum. That's about all I wanted to say.
So it sounds like we can wrap that pretty much up nicely, and we can get into the main topic of the episode. And Tim, what is that for today?
So I wanted to ask you guys, my community is very, very small. It's just 2 of us. I know that almost, if not all of you, have started your own community and really grown it, especially with someone like Mick, who's basically grown the GBHL at the start, or Devin with the DCHL, or Rainier with the Philly SBG, and Matt with the New England Middle-earth Strategy Battle Gamers. How do you guys grow your community to be something much bigger than what it currently is? What are some advice you guys would have on that kind of situation?
It's actually a pretty big question. So ultimately, I think there's a couple different factors, and I'm gonna bring up one just right now. I guess I'll just chime in. And as many of you guys know, I founded the DCHL group that's in the Washington DC area, and one thing that I actually found really, really helpful that actually kind of exploded my community to a point where my GW was so full of Lord of the Rings players that 40K players couldn't even get a table, is terrain. So there's a player named Alex Wright whom brought in, he's a terrain maker. He has the Wright War Game Terrain, company that basically he makes terrain, and he makes really elaborate structures and a lot of different things across Middle Earth. Well, I looked at this terrain and I was like, hey, is this made with any third-party parts? Like, did you just construct this yourself? And he's like, yeah, completely all 100% his own stuff. And I'm like, we should bring this to GW and play on it. And what ended up happening was, as soon as anyone walked into the store, they would see that table and they would be like, wow, that is gorgeous. And automatically, the game just became interesting to them. Like they wanted to come over and they wanted to talk about it and ask about it. They heard about the Lord of the Rings then. And whereas normally they would look, all right, we're just some other group of players playing, one of the lower end games. Now we're playing on this massive Rivendell board. So that actually had quite an effect. Now that's, of course, one of many different things. But what do you guys think about that? Like as far as terrain in impact, like just bringing it into your local GW over and over again.
Yeah, I like that idea. I think in your era of growing the DCHL, it's when players weren't playing SBG. Me and a few guys. So Philly SBG was started by me, myself, Samir Abusaf, and Jesse Schaefer. We built the community after the new edition was re-released. So I guess ours was more catching the eye of new players and inserting them into the community, whether that be tournament play or a regular weekly basis of gaming. So I don't know. For reference to our conversations, just so the viewers know that like each of us founded our communities at different times. If that makes sense.
Yeah, actually, I think Mick, you're coming from a time of founding it even years before even I founded mine. So.
I mean, the thing that I think it was with Lord of the Rings in the UK, that back in like let's say 2006, 7, 8, we had these gigantic tournaments where the GTs had let's say 145 players on them. So it was the whole group, well the whole community was doing really well up until about let's say 2011, 12, where everything just sort of started to die out. And it was essentially Dan Entwistle and Sam Jeffrey who created the group, which is now the GBHL Facebook group. And then there was maybe like, I don't know, 70 or 80 people on it initially. And so the plan was essentially to bring people back into playing and actually sort of regrow interest and to try to get new players to actually come and play and join us, because a lot of the players we had were already quite competitive players, and so we all just needed sort of a platform to play on. So the main thing, well, one of the important things that we did at the beginning was to sort of basically contact anyone who might want to organize a tournament, and then essentially create a little league between everybody. And then as soon as some sort of rankings came up, people started being a bit interested in being like, okay, well, this isn't just for us to play just for fun, but like if we attend more of these events, we might actually be able to compete and actually have more fun throughout the season and things like that. So essentially, I thought that the fact that Facebook exists, which I didn't before, Facebook obviously was a very important factor of it. And then just sort of organizing some sort of a league where you don't even have to make it super competitive from day one, but actually organize something that makes people feel like they sort of belong within this group and actually have a purpose to come and play at your tournaments instead of, let's say, doing a million other things on a weekend, which very often I would rather do. But I'm happy to, let's say, sacrifice my standard weekend activities and go to a tournament if I feel like that's actually going to be beneficial to me in long term, especially when it comes to hanging out with certain individuals who I like, and also just competing long term.
So I wanted to bring up another thing, which I think I'm not sure if you guys would attribute this to growing the community as well. Do you need to have competitive players in your group for that to grow, or is it something where it kind of scares people off because there's competitive players and they just kind of want to get into the game?
I think you need to balance the two in many ways. For myself, when I organize and co-organize events, it's very much you're doing events for, I feel like, three types of people. You're doing it for the top players, the really competitive players, the low tier players who it's either their first tournament or they're just going to have fun with their friends. and you're doing it for the out-of-towners. So I know Matt will probably have more to this because he has years of experience balancing this aspect. But I think it's a huge problem that many organizers have is how competitive do you make it? Do you make it too competitive, or is it too competitive to where it causes people to lose the taste, like your local players who just bought the Pelennor Fields box set to be like, oh, this is too much for me. It's a very hard balance. What do you think about that, Matt?
So yeah, I mean, that's a concern. And I know at least in our local area, there aren't that many competitive players. There are some players who are starting to kind of become more competitive. But when they first started out, they were, kind of occasional players. And we have a lot of occasional players here. And I know I made a conscious effort whenever I would put together events and to call them game days and not tournaments, so that there was not pressure for people to come up and say, oh, I'm going to compete in a tournament. Because I know we've got a number of people here who, once you start calling something a tournament, are like, yeah, no, I don't know if I want to participate in that. And then when we do run what we call a tournament here, which is Shadow in the East, what I've been trying to do for the last few years, change it into what we call a narrative format tournament, where it's two teams of players who are playing against each other, where your individual performance isn't what matters. It's what matters is what happens when you're part of a team. And that seems to be a much more palatable way to put on an event for most of the players that we play with here.
Actually, as a person who has a lot of experience in Matt's Shadow in the East tournaments, I can definitely say that is a very good method to balance out competitive play along with basically the theme and the balance. So he basically sets it up where it's good versus evil, and one side is on all the evil players and the other side is all the good players, and they kind of build themselves up. Now, there's an art to doing this because you can create like landslide effects where one team just wins all their rounds one game and then suddenly, well, there's no stopping them, and you get discouraged. So there is an art to this, and I think, if you're ever interested, definitely contact Matt Iverson, and he'll give you his format. I'm sure he'd love to share that. But just to touch on something Mick said before I hand it off, I think that competitive play is actually very important to building a community. I'm a huge advocate of it, and I understand that a majority of players, when you go to Articon or Nova, 80% of the players do not come there expecting to win. A majority know that they are not going to win this tournament. However, the fact that so many people are attending has a power to it, and that attendance, I really think, is rooted in a competitive event. You don't have to call it a tournament, okay? You don't have to do that, but it brings people together. Just having a game day, as Matt said, brings people together where, everyone is associating with friends. They're having like an investment basically into this hobby and into the friendships and the camaraderies that's being built of everyone who has a common interest. So I do think if you're a person trying to build a community, that you should at least try to set up those game days. And as a final thought to that, is basically the Nova Open. If I were to run the Nova Open as like a scenario-based event, let's say I just eliminated the grand tournament and I said, I'm going to have 10 copies of a giant Helm's Deep, made by Alex Wright, and they're all going to be beautiful displays, and we're just going to play that scenario out. I'd probably get like 20 people to attend. Whereas when I say a GT, I can get 100. And so there is some power to be said about the aspects of competitive play. So that's just my thoughts on it. I know Rainier wanted to mention something first. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. Actually, a little bit from both of what you guys said. For Matt's first, how he does Shadow in the East, it's a really, really cool idea. It gets people to feel like they're cooperating together. What I do for my events, and you'd probably know this, Devin, from an unexpected tourney, I distributed prizes in a way that encouraged people, like non-competitive players as well. For example, the best prize, in my opinion, I got Dwellin's axes, and it went to the best sport. So like, distribute you prizes. Of course, give the top 3 really good prizes, but also distribute, really good prizes for painting, really good prizes for best sportsmanship. So it allows someone to go to an event and win something, even if they're not gonna go ham and be like tossing people aside. Back to Devin's competitive point, I totally agree with Devin. Your community has to grow in a competitive aspect. What I would suggest to do to balance it out is have your events go for your community, whether your community is not competitive or competitive. Build it around getting more people to attend and getting new players into the game. But as a group, form an identity and form a competitive identity, if that makes sense. So, for example, us in the Eastern Pennsylvania, we have our own shirts. We have a polo with our logo on, and each event we attend, we go to as a group, and we think, okay, we're representing not just our city, but we're representing our region. And it creates this cool, I guess, competitive rivalry where it's like the DCHL against the Philly SBG or the DCHL against North Carolina. And it encourages not only veteran players to like go at it with each other, but it also encourages new players to be interested. Like, oh, wow, my group's doing really well. I can root for them. I can attend with a jersey also, even though I know I'm not going to be contributing to our scoring as a group, but we as a group have an identity. And for me, I guess that's what's helped a lot with my group forming identity. If that makes sense, what do you guys think?
I actually, as a quick note to your identity fact, I actually think this is a reason of many that an event like Articon is so successful. And so it creates that identity amongst your own team. So just to show the power of just unifying a group. Mick, I know you had your hand up earlier.
Yeah, no, I was just going to add also, there's a lot of stigma about competitive play in general. Like very often people might assume that, let's say, if you call someone a competitive player, then they're going to be, let's say, by default, very picky, a bit of an asshole, and so on. So the thing is, we're not all bad. Yeah, well, sometimes there may be some negative moments that you might have, but generally, pretty much everything in life is about competing. Like pretty much throughout your life, you can be competing for work, you can be competing for husband, wife, you can be competing for anything in school, any sort of grades, any sort of competition. So essentially, healthy competition, there isn't really anything wrong with it. In fact, it's sort of our whole society is sort of built up on the aspect of healthy competition. So I would just say that people shouldn't really think of competitive play and competitive players as something negative, which I've often felt like has been a thing in certain parts of the world. What do you guys think?
So I guess the thought I have about that is, and this is something I think I've talked about before, is you have to kind of draw a line between competitive play and kind of not being afraid to lose. And that, I think, really is the line between folks who are competitive in a positive way, in that they want to win and they show other people how to win and they're always kind of working to win, and folks who are competitive in a negative way, which is when you kind of hear competitive used as a pejorative, what people are talking about. And those are people who are like, I will not lose. And if it looks like I'm losing, I'm going to become more and more aggressive and more unpleasant to the point where people don't want to play with me anymore. And that's certainly not the attitude that you want to have when you're trying to build a group. You have to be able to go out there and take some off the wall lists and take them against the newer players. And if you lose, you lose. And it's good experience for you because you get to try different situations. It's good experience for them because it's a bit of an ego boost for them to be able to take you down, and it keeps everything fun.
No, yeah, to piggyback on that, like your image as a player, because I know all 5 of us travel, whether it be international or across state borders to play in other people's tournaments. You as a player has a huge reflection on your group. So if you're a sore loser, or if you go up with like every single event, I know Devin's really good at this. Devin doesn't go with a competitive list at every single event. Like I know I try to come up with wonky lists. Matt Iverson's obsessed with his signal tower. He always brings that.
More signal tower.
That's going to be the hashtag. We're going to start hashtag
Sorry, what's
more
the signal
signal
tower?
tower.
Hashtag more signal tower.
Sorry, what's a signal tower? Can you tell me more about it?
Sure, let me get out the book.
Future episodes.
Each episode. Hello, my name's Matt Iverson. Have you heard of the religion of the signal tower? No, but to get to your point, get back to the topic. You as a player reflects a lot on your community. So, like I was saying, don't bring Frankenstein-esque, like super competitive lists to every single tournament. Don't go to win every single tournament. Maybe attend a tournament to paint. Bring a beautiful painting and display that. Because everything you do as a person at an event, you're wearing your logo on your shirt. It's going to reflect bad if you're misbehaving, basically. I don't know. What do you guys think? Does that make sense?
I'm huge on what you're saying right there. I mean, just to chime in, I mean, ultimately, I think integrity and being willing to lose, as Matt mentioned, are massive factors if you're going to lead a community. If you are a person who just really cannot stand the idea of losing, you seem to just have it on your face. Like, it's fine to be disappointed, you know, but when you just are upset, visibly upset, then a lot of people are not going to gravitate to your group. And so I definitely agree, like, you know, that, like, making sure, you know, as far as the competitive list, Rainier mentioned, you know, I actually switch my list pretty much every single time I go to a tournament to try and play everything, really. And I find I have a lot of fun doing that. Even just one day go to a tournament where you just bring nothing but good and bad trolls. Like, I don't know, like something ridiculous. And basically, you know, just have fun, like try to really remember about having fun, but then still trying to win with that. But yeah, I think the base point of what Rainier was saying, just being, you know, a person whom is fun to hang around. And I think a really good way to do that is to do what Matt said, which is being totally okay with losing. I mean, Mick, do you have anything on that?
Yeah, I personally don't think that you can actually call yourself a good player if you're afraid of losing, because ultimately, we are playing a dice game. There will be times when, regardless how much you sort of crush your opponent's soul, you're still gonna lose because things are just gonna go in the wrong way for you. So if you're gonna be sour about every one of your losses, then there's just no point. Like, you might as well just go and play on your PlayStation or whatever else. So ultimately, you just have to accept the fact that you will be losing games and you will be doing it often. And like, it's just not possible for someone to win, let's say, 100 out of 100 games in a year throughout every tournament. So yeah, just accept it.
So Tim, pretty much just to recap the 3 points we've already brought up so far, so everyone knows following, we're talking about building a community. I mean, I mentioned the point of bringing fantastic terrain to draw the eyes of people into your store and wanting to hang out with you. We all mentioned the aspect of competitive play, how important that is. And then, of course, you and your integrity as a person and as a player in the game. I mean, is there any other thoughts you might have as far as, like, okay, maybe challenges you're facing in your community that, you know, maybe we might have experience on how to solve?
So one thing I think I find, we don't really, so we play in a comic book store, and it's one of those things where it's always me and the same person every week, and we play the same thing. And, you know, it's enjoyable games and all that, but as you can probably imagine, it's always fun to have diversity and play somebody else with a different mindset or somebody else with a different army, that kind of a thing. But the main struggle I find is, we don't get new players come in very often. But the main, I think you all know which game I'm going to refer to. There's a very large version of a miniature game that everybody plays. And that seems to be where everybody in my area is located at. And I don't know, do you guys have a way in which you find you could get someone from like 40K to kind of look at Lord of the Rings in that regard? Because that seems to be where a majority of the people in my area, at least, are kind of focused, is 40K. But I don't know how to get someone like a 40K player to kind of be interested in Lord of the Rings to try it out.
So this is where I think the earlier point about bringing the terrain is really useful. I mean, I know that's how we get a lot of our players here in New England is we have some great boards, some of which Alex Wright built, and need to kind of get out of people's houses and get to stores once stores reopen. Of course, we can't do that right now, but and then you bring the really nice boards to the game stores, and the people who are wandering by see it and go, oh yeah, I bought some Lord of the Rings miniatures a long time ago, and we never really played with them, and it's good to see people playing with this. And you can get people who are like, yeah, I'm interested in doing this, and get them involved. And then once you kind of get that hook into them, you need to keep the hook in them, and which requires really kind of doing a lot of outreach work. And it's outreach work via email, it's outreach work via Facebook, to really get those people and kind of keep conversations going with those people and keep them interested and keep them coming back, which means you really have to spend a lot of time scrolling through the Facebook feed and getting past all the pictures of James Clark in his underwear to get to the
Fantastic
stuff.
imagery.
Yeah. So what's up with that, by the way? I mean,
PG-13.
Yeah. Is it just me? But I mean, I have to scroll a long way before I get past James Clark, pictures of James Clark in his underwear, and I get to the substance. And I never open this stuff. And the only other person who uses my Facebook account is my wife, so I really can't account for it. I don't know why I keep being bombarded with this.
Just making sure this is not a real thing, right? I'm like suddenly wondering because I mean
I don't know about you, Matt. That's the highlight of my day, at least. I mean, that's what I look forward to coming home to.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, fair enough. Maybe Facebook knows me better than I do.
They looked at your recent search history and they're like, "Oh, this is exactly what he'll like."
Yeah. So James, we all love you. Keep going. Keep doing what you're doing. But put some knickers on, please.
Also, that's a very impressive six-pack.
Yeah.
Oh, those posts. Yes. All right. That's okay. I'm following along because Ab and six-pack posts. I actually was thinking about, well, not to get all totally off topic. I'll PM you, James. I'll PM you.
So one other question I had regarding to this. Let's say I have me and another person, and obviously we're trying to build the community. And I know you mentioned the terrain pieces, but let's say I didn't have the money to buy like a really nice board or something like that, or let's say I didn't have enough people interested in attending a tournament, or we're not prepared to create our own tournament because let's say we didn't know enough about the game that we felt confident enough that we could actually host a tournament. How would you guys get someone to just simply start playing the game if there was no terrain and no tournament coming?
I say if you're interested in the game enough, build some terrain. It doesn't have to be fancy like Alex Wright's terrain, but build some terrain to play, or just use comic book terrain. To piggyback on what Matt was saying a lot of it is outreach. And I totally agree with that. If you don't have Lord of the Rings players, play 40K with somebody. They're only a 40K player. Be like, okay, I'll play a game with you. Teach me your game. I'll teach you my game. And slowly see if they want to play Lord of the Rings. That's how a lot of Pennsylvanians got into the game. But more so, for my group, it's not so much recruiting people, it's finding people that want to be recruited in a way, if that makes sense. There's a lot of people out there that are searching for the game, whether it's on Facebook threads or YouTube channel with comments. They'll say, okay, I like the game. Ask, okay, where are you from? Are you from the local area? We have a group. Even if it's Tim, you said it's just you and another guy. Just say, okay, 2 of us play. Come on by. Like, we'll show you the game. So a lot of it is just constantly asking people, oh, cool, like you like the game. Come join us. Or never say, come to my tournament. Come to this tournament. Say, come to my event. That's a big tournament's a big no-no because it It just sounds too competitive.
So the way you
Just-
phrase things, kind of a thing.
Yeah, phrase it as an event. Be like, oh, we celebrate the game. We have cool painting. It's not really competitive. It's fun. Just come to my event and join.
Don't forget also that there are conventions out there, assuming there will be conventions again at some point in time, where folks who are predisposed to being interested in our games are going to be. And if you go and you put on events at those conventions, you'll find a few people every time you do that. Every time I run Shadow in the East, because we run it at Captain Con down in Rhode Island every year. And every time I put that on, we get 2 or 3 new players who I had no idea were in the area. And they'll show up and they'll be in the tournament and be like, yeah, I've just been playing with my friend and we didn't realize anybody else played. And then we saw this at the convention. So we decided to come and try it out. And that's how you get a bunch of those kind of initial contacts that you work on afterwards.
Yeah, there's another thing where if, let's say, you attend events, then just take as many pictures as you possibly can, and then you can share them. Let's say not only just on your Facebook, but let's say if you have if you're a member of some sort of a local group who might be playing, let's say, 40K, Malifaux, some other games, War Machine, or whatever else, then just like do a little bit of a spamming situation where you say, well, I just attended this great Lord of the Rings tournament. Check out all these pictures. It might just randomly attract some people.
And
Okay.
A good point. I think I know you do that, Devin, you do that, Matt, I do that. Like each event, even if it's just a gathering,
Oh yeah.
post it on your local group. Oh, look at this. Like me and Ben and Jerry, whoever, some random person, we played a game. Look at the cool armies we had. It was so much fun. They did great. And then like underneath, look forward to our event on May 25th. Look forward to our event January 25th. Like always get the community interested in it. You can even spam. I know there's the GBHL page for like y'all Europeans, but there's the ASBGA page for Americans. And what we have like 1,000 people on there. Not all of them attend events. Most of them are just hobbyists. And we spam, just not spam because it sounds negative. We post recaps always of look at the event winners. Look at who won best painted. Look at their beautiful army. Look at the boards that were played. Look at these in-game photos as TOs were taking photos during. Look at the in-game photos of what was happening. And each time it's like someone will comment, oh, cool. I live 30 minutes from where that event is. When's your next event? Boom. Give them the information. Our next event is in 2 months at this location. And have that in the back of your mind as it's approaching. Be like, hey, it's two weeks away. I know you said you're interested. Maybe you want to come to the event. Are you interested? Can I accommodate you in any ways? So it's just staying engaged is really big.
So Rainier, you're a better man than I have Ben and Jerry come to tournaments. Those guys are competitive jerks. I never want to be around them.
Yeah, no, like I'm lactose intolerant. Ben and Jerry hate.
Honestly, it was something that Rainier said. Actually, everyone's kind of alluding to one thing about these photos. So we're getting into a marketing sort of side of creating interest into your event. So Tim, you talked about it. You got mostly 40K players. I know you say you don't have the terrain, but let's be honest. How often do you look at pictures of anything where it's just gray models and they're playing on a green board with like some Coke cans and some towers and whatnot? I mean, you're really going to scroll right by that. You genuinely don't care. You walk into a store, it's not going to look interesting. This is actually, I think, the power of coming in with a person who has fully painted, gorgeous models. This is why I absolutely encourage hosting events where, of course, a few where you don't have painted models, but ones where you do, because those pictures, they really come alive in that. And with the fantastic terrain. So, okay, you don't have any good terrain. You're not a terrain maker. And yeah, sure, Rainier brought the idea of you making terrain, but let's just say you really don't have time to learn. Well, you do have the GW terrain kits, and they actually look pretty good. Now, if you don't want to build them yourself, I'm sure that there's someone out there who will, have an interest in building them, but you don't have to literally build all the terrain yourself now. And then as far as the photos and everything, once again, absolutely spam that out. But one thing you're going to note is there's a trend on Facebook where certain players feel that it is in their best interest to spam every single Facebook page in order to get them to watch their YouTube channel or whatever's going on. And it always comes back to just making sure that that content that you're throwing out there looks visually interesting. Because if it doesn't, then they're probably not going to watch it, or in your case, join your group. So I know Mick had a thought on that. Got it?
I mean, it's a bit like with Instagram, essentially, because the whole concept of Instagram is basically just pictures and then some hashtags, some sort of writing below it. And yet, pretty much everyone I know uses Instagram, and it's hugely popular, even though it's essentially just images. So imagery sells everything in the best way possible.
Yeah, and know when to do it. So, for example, if Matt just posted Shadow of the East photos, and 2 hours later I post, oh, look to an unexpected tourney, be excited. You're first of all, you're taken away from someone else's event, and also it's just going to get lost in the thing. There, you have to know when to post. Like, don't post Wednesday morning on the ASBGA, oh, we have an event, please come, and post it with like a picture of like a model or something. No, post on a Friday night, a Saturday evening with beautiful pictures of maybe like your painted models. If it's your first time, say, okay, we have an event here, know when the traffic's going to come, and do it at strategic times, whether it be, okay, once a month, okay, here's a monthly warning, 1 month away, 2 weeks away, 1 week away, like get them excited. Like Mick said, everyone's on Instagram, and most people know when to post your stories or whatever, when to post your picture of you eating a cup of coffee or drinking a cup of coffee. Same goes for strategizing on events. Know when to post it. What were you going to say though, Matt?
So also remember that you're not alone, right? So there are people around you that are active in the groups and are going to be near you, and try reaching out and talking to them. And, if you're going to put some effort into it, go ahead and talk to the folks who are around and see if you can get sort of a group event together. Like, for example, you're in Rochester, right, Tim?
Syracuse.
Syracuse. Okay. So, granted, you're kind of in the boonies because it's Syracuse, but there are people around you. Bobby Noto and a couple of other folks are in the Springfield area. Alex Dubois in northwestern Connecticut. Those guys are willing to travel. And if you can figure out an area that's kind of centrally located to all of you, or at least within reach, like say Albany, get in touch with those guys. Get in touch with get in touch with Alex. Get in touch with Bobby, and say, look, why don't we get together and we'll all have a get together at at this place in Albany on this date. And then start talking to other people and say, look, there's going to be half a dozen of us who are going to get together at this place in Albany on this date. Do you want to come? And then once you've kind of got that critical mass of like 6 people, then, the folks who are in Massachusetts may say, well, that's worth a trip. That's worth a couple hours drive to go out and spend a day gaming with folks in Albany. And maybe some folks will come up from New York and kind of grow it organically that way. But it does require a little work, and it does require a little planning.
Yeah, and to kind of piggyback on what we were talking about earlier, you represent your group when you attend other events, and I'd really encourage you to go to other events, not just in your city but in your region, whether it's 2, 3, or 4 hours away. Like, some of the best some of the best gathering of players is to go to other events and get them to come to your events.
I mean, the other thing I was going to say is that, if there's individuals with, if there's personal interactions that don't work that well in local groups, then sometimes a way to kind of go and gather some other folks from other areas and bring them in is a way to kind of submerge that, because you get different interactions that go on. You meet different people. You get different examples of play, and it's a great way to kind of bring new life into your local group.
I think as a final point about once it was mentioned actually playing with 40K players, and this one actually requires a little bit of that marketing knowledge that Rainier, Matt, Mick are all stating. When you go into, in all fairness, when I started the DCHL with the terrain, I also did play 40K at the time, and I do still have that 40K army. I just bought it just to make sure I could integrate with those groups, because what you're doing then is you're creating familiarity. If, let's say, you don't have the terrain, you're not making any effort to do any of that, then what you're going to have to do, you're always going to be those guys. You're just those Lord of the Rings players. You need to become more relatable to the other individuals in that building and the people who attend there frequently. By playing 40K and then on the side playing Lord of the Rings, but then constantly mentioning Lord of the Rings, they'll be actually more encouraged to listen to you because of the fact that you're now a friend of theirs. You're, one of us, I guess you can say. And so essentially that is a tactic that you can use, at least when you're first starting out. Let's say you have 1 or 2 players and it's really difficult to do. And, you can even encourage, let's say, run a campaign. Now, campaigns can be a little tricky. I wouldn't make them go too long. They tend to drag out a little bit. But if you make it like a 3-day campaign or whatever, then you can just say, hey, you know what? Use my models, try out this game. We're running a little campaign. And as long as you make the campaign with an emphasis on fun, and I've seen a lot of D&D style Lord of the Rings campaigns that worked very well, where you basically have a game master who kind of makes it up as he goes along, in a sense. But with a plan, though, make sure it's a focus on fun. You might find that the person will just try it out once, no investment on their part, right? That you provided the models, and then you put out gorgeous terrain and whatnot, and you might find that they'll, once again, that's just another tactic you can use to get them to be like, oh, this is actually an interesting game. Because ultimately your challenge is getting them to even entertain the idea that this might be a good game. They're not going to do that unless they feel either, 1, you have gorgeous models or gorgeous terrain that attracts them to want to even look at it, or 2, you as an individual are a person they would want to hang out with. So just a note on that.
All right.
So I think
I think that it's all very interesting to hear, the terrain, because I mean, I can speak for the terrain personally. I remember even when we would come back from Nova some years, that the 40K players would legitimately go up to us like, yeah, you guys have the best boards. You have I wanted to play Lord of the Rings just to play on those boards, kind of a thing. So the boards thing, it's something that I'm definitely going to keep in mind, because that's definitely something where I've heard year after year that I've been doing this, that even when I go to a Lord of the Rings tournament and someone's just there to observe or whatnot, they're so interested in the quality of the boards that they would want to play on them. So it's very interesting to take that into consideration, as well as the concept of advertising what you do on groups, and constantly be at people. Well, I wouldn't say that, go at people and kind of say like, hey, come to, but to just kind of say, hey, we're doing this in a month. Can you do this with us? Or are you interested in doing this with us? And just kind of keeping on people and saying, hey, we're doing this. Are you interested? It's something to definitely keep in mind in the future when trying to grow my group.
Okay.
I got a question. Do you guys have different strategies you use to get more people to attend from out of state?
Well, out of state. So I think this is a hard subject for me and Mick primarily, I would think, because we actually have concentrated areas. So out of state for me is like you, which you're like an hour or 2 away. And then Mick has a kind of similar thing. I know the traveling restrictions or limitations in the UK are a little bit different. Like the public transit's obviously a lot better
compared to America.
Yeah,
like the entire UK is what, like 6?
it's like Florida.
It's probably like a 7 or 8 hour drive from one end to the other.
Yeah,
Also, it's
for us,
at the very north of it. So like any sort of civilization, you probably reach within 6 or 7 hours.
So here's what I do to get players from out of state. All right, and I've seen other people follow the same tactics. You pretty much got to host, once again, competitive event, and you want to host it in a location that's convenient for travel. Not only convenient for travel, but also a tourist location, something that people have heard about. So if you're out there, way out there, this might be your Nashville, Tennessee, or like, I don't want to name all the different places and states because we have international viewers who may not even know these cities. But one advantage that I have is I'm in DC. So inviting, like, let's say the GBHL podcast, when they came over twice, 3 or 4 times in some cases, they came because it's also a vacation spot. It's also a major location. So I know that Rainier has some experience in hosting, actually Rainier and Matt have experience hosting events where you're trying to grab people from multiple places and trying to bring them to one spot. And I think they'll elaborate on this, but what I've noticed is Matt and Rainier focus it around conventions. And so once again, what they've done is they've turned their remote location into a destination location because now there's an actual venue happening, regardless of whether or not you actually do anything in the venue or not. But I don't know, you guys have any thoughts on that?
The other thing I was going to say is, trying to build up relationships with other folks around the country. I mean, I travel to a bunch of tournaments, and whenever I do that, I try and build up a relationship with the folks who at the tournaments where I go, so that they'll kind of reciprocate and come back. And Devin, you've always been a big supporter of the tournaments that I run up here, and I try and do that with folks from other places to get them to come. But I mean, one thing I will say is it is very difficult to kind of base an event around people who are going to travel from other places, at least in the U.S. You really have to have a core of locals who are enough to support the tournament or the game day on its own. And then if you get a few extra folks from out of state, that's great. I mean, if you're running Nova, that's obviously kind of a different kettle of fish. But your first goal should be to build up a core of people, maybe 6 or 8 people who are willing to come, and then you can kind of bring in some other people to support that.
Yeah, I'd agree. Which goes back to like the beginning of our conversation is, what I said is, it's a balance. You're building events for competitive players, non-competitive players, and out of states. It's really hard. What I've did though, to try to continue to get out of state players and local players, is our group does something called heroic challenges. Not the heroic challenges that no one uses in the game, but
we actually use these ones.
These are actual useful heroic challenges for once in my life.
It's a documented case of somebody using a heroic challenge.
I turned down once.
I screenshot it, so like hopefully I can show it. No, but we do something which is called a heroic challenge. On any of the Facebook pages, you publicly challenge one of your rivals or best friends or something. You'll say something, for example, I can challenge, say, Alisher, someone from my group. I can be like, Alisher, you were once my Padawan, but now you've turned to the dark side. I hereby publicly challenge you to humble you and prove that you are lesser than me. Something ridiculous that's just silly and fun. But as a TO, if the person accepts the challenge, you're automatically paired against them in round 1. And this does a few things. This first gets, well, 3 things actually. First, it advertises the event because people are challenging each other on Facebook and they're making videos, and it gets people excited about the event. Second, it gets out-of-towners to come because you'll have, say, someone from North Carolina challenge someone from Virginia or vice versa. And you'll get more inter-community, all the different rivalries between the groups. Philly will challenge DCHL and so forth. So it'll get more attendance. And third, it actually doesn't fix the scoring, but it gives, in my opinion, how do I phrase it? It gives people who would not usually get top 3 a better chance. Because, for example, say Devin challenges me in an event. We'd auto be paired in round 1. So right off the bat, one of us is not going to make it to the top 3. It kind of puts all your really good players who are challenging each other and building the community and like hyping it up. And it knocks them down because they're fighting each other, and it gives other new players a chance to, I guess, place higher than they usually would. I don't know. What do you think about that, Devin? Because you've participated.
Actually, I thought about it at one point, implementing a system very similarly where you what would instantly happen. I'll try to summarize it quick. Is you rank yourself, right? Like, so you either rank yourself a 3, 2, or a 1. This is just basic. I'm making it real simple, but you rank yourself a 3, 2, or a 1. That's your skill level as a player. So 3 being the highest, 1 being the lowest, and you would automatically be granted, like, I don't want to say it like this, but it's not really how it works. But you basically get granted those tournament points automatically, but you can only be paired with other players on that same skill level. So if you pick 3, you get 3 tournament points automatically, but you can only be paired against other 3s. And so it would make it where competitive players would start knocking at each other quite a bit, and then the lower tiers actually have a shot of like winning the event. Now, like I said, this is a very simplistic version, so if you're noticing problems with this, don't worry. That's like, it's a little bit more complicated than that. But I know I developed that system because of Rainier's challenge system, because it did exactly that. By using the challenge system, one, it actually kind of creates this cool rivalry that you see on Facebook, and you post about it, and there's a little bit of underlying pressure there, but 2, I think it just really did kind of create some fun to it. I think in a very controlled manner, where as long as you don't have like the same 2 players, challenging each other over and over and over again, I thought it was actually quite a great way to keep the camaraderie within a group. So bringing it back to the topic that we have, like, you're trying to build a group, having those rivalries, friendly rivalries. Once again, if, like we mentioned in the third point, if you don't have the integrity to be okay with losing, this won't work. But yeah, I do agree with it. So I think to go ahead and finalize this episode off, I mean, the terrain is important, competitive play is important, your integrity as a person is important, your charisma and ability to market is important, your ability to attract other people to your tables using either terrain or, mingling with their group and becoming friends with those in the store is important. Hosting events and making sure you have the insignias, bond together as a group, like Rainier said, have your t-shirts and, create the camaraderie between you. And then while at the same time creating a rivalry with a local group, because you know what, I might travel 4 hours if I know that I'm going to be challenged by Rainier and I'm like, hey, you know what, let's go ahead and do it. That the distance suddenly doesn't feel as bad because it became like this fun little interaction to it. So that's another method, and so just take everything that we've been saying today. And I think these are all great points to start a community. And with that, Tim, I'll bring it back to you.
All right. I want to thank everybody for listening to this episode. If you have any lists that you'd like for us to review, please leave those in the comment section below. And we look forward to seeing you next week.
Guys.